Alrighty. Welcome, everyone, back to On Your Left. This is episode 3. I think I wanted to call it A Couple Good Men or something cheesy like that. Because, as you probably know, if you're coming right from episode 2, we are going to be talking about Captain America and Iron Man today and doing a little analysis and comparison of their arcs and how their stories unfolded. Kobe, how are we doing?
Doing pretty good.
Nice, yes.
Happy to be here on this snowy day.
Yeah.
Recovering from the snow, but it's Friday. Feeling good.
Yes, and we did change. Yes, if you are watching, you have a Marvel themed sweater on, which I
Yes.
appreciate. I got a Star Wars one, which will be close enough. I should get a Marvel Christmas sweater, but you can't go wrong. So we are going to dive into the latest news. That'll probably be a recurring thing in these episodes because I kind of like that. Two big things we're going to talk about. One we will both talk about, but the first one will mainly be Kobe here because you recently went and saw Interstellar again in IMAX, the re-release.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. The people need to see your reaction.
So I went with Risa, a friend of ours. So it was actually right before my finals week, and I was kind of on a movie hiatus, but I insisted on going to see that just because I didn't know if I was going to get a chance to. At the time, they didn't have a lot of showings. They have since had more because there's been huge demand.
Oh, of course.
Which should tell you something about the love for the movie. But yeah, I just had to go and see Tars over here, my boy Tars. But wow, you forget how great of an experience it is because again, it's been 10 years, and I saw it in IMAX then, and seeing it in IMAX then was amazing. Mm-hmm. Because I was late to the game to get the tickets, we ended up in the first row.
That's right. I was going to ask you about that.
So you can't get any more immersive than that. You are looking up at it the entire time, and once we leave Earth, man, it's just it's captivating. Mm-hmm. And you know, if you love, like, or watch a lot of Nolan movies, you know that sound mixing is kind of his baby. And he makes sure you're in the thick of it, sound-wise. Like, I think a lot of people get irritated with his sound mixing because, like, sometimes dialogue can get a little fuzzy and things of that nature. But I appreciate it because it does feel like that's what it would sound like if you're there, if you're in that scene, if you're in that locale. Like, it would not be easy to discern. You know what I mean? Like when you get in the rumbling of, you know, the acceleration of a ship or you know, those kinds of things. So it was an amazing experience. Crowd kind of reacting the way that you'd expect. Oh, yeah. You almost forget about the little surprises along the way that are happening in that movie, but it's fantastic. I believe there's still, I hesitate because I haven't actually looked, but I think they were going to be doing just a couple scattered ones throughout the next, up until about Christmas. So if you're in a market, an area that is still doing that, if you see this and you still have a chance to go and see it, I'm sure there'll be another chance to see it in the future just based on the popularity. But it was fantastic to do, and I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, and again, not surprised that they needed more screenings and that the people wanted that. And even I was initially surprised to hear your ticket debacle, or the fact that you ended in the front row because it was so busy, because you went on a Sunday night at 9:30, didn't you?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. It's Sunday. It's the beginning of a new week. You'd think it would be on the quieter side, but no, it was packed. And I looked around a couple times, especially in the beginning. We actually ended up having 7 or 8 trailers, which I thought was insane for a re-release. Yeah, new trailers, like we were going to a premiere or something.
Nice.
But yeah, it was packed. It was busy. If you didn't know, it's a record for a re-release, for an IMAX re-release, 21 million worldwide, which again, that's pretty insane. There's a lot of indie movies that don't do that on their first weekend.
Yeah.
21 million in mainly IMAX. I think that's the criteria for this movie being out. I think there's a couple exceptions where they're having it play on a regular screen, but predominantly IMAX screens. And they made 21 million. That's pretty good.
Well, maybe I'll try to see it. Maybe I'll try to see it when I go home for the holidays, and if my local hometown theaters are still doing it. But obviously, part of what I love about going to movies is going with you and the group. And so, Risa is also someone great to go see movies with. She always dresses up for Marvel movies. I'm sure. I'm guessing you guys didn't really dress up for Interstellar. But
no, we could have, but no, that would have been a bit extra.
That's a lot. Again, Sunday night, 9:30. That's a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, shout out if it's still going on in your area. Again, yeah, even if you've seen it already, go again because it sounds like I can't believe 10 years. That's crazy.
It is.
So that is number one, what we wanted to talk about in the news, and now number two, very recent, which is great because hopefully then I'll get this out very soon and it will still be relevant. But it was just yesterday or 2 days ago. Yesterday, that the new Superman trailer dropped officially. And so we were going to talk about our thoughts and reactions to that. So I'm going to let you go first on this one.
It's hard. I don't know what way to go with this one.
Okay.
It's not even that I do have some excitement for it. It's just I so loved and appreciated Henry Cavill's version. And then there was a brief moment where we thought we were getting him back, and then they came out and said, actually, that's not happening. We're rebooting everything. So that was sad. But focusing on the now, the one thing you can say about the trailer for sure is that it is so like the previous iteration. It was a little dark. It was a little moody. This seems lighter. It seems more hopeful. The music is sort of like the guitar strumming. There's just they're really leaning into that, which it visually looks really, really nice. It looks like also we're just kind of like in the action right away in terms of I don't know that they're going to spend a ton of time on Origins in this.
No.
Like, we just are starting. He's active, it looks like. There's also a lot of other DC characters in this, which I'm kind of fascinated to see if they're all just doing their own thing. Is there, like, a Justice League thing on the horizon, or is that just not even on the table? But, like, there's a lot going on in this trailer that I'm sure people are going to break down. I'm sure there's a bunch of breakdowns online already. I would say that on a scale of 1 to 10, it hit me at about a 7, where I'm like, ooh, there's some shots in there that were really liked. It looks promising.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think?
I would agree. I will preface this by saying I'm much more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy. I've seen The Dark Knight with Christian Bale. Obviously, I've seen that whole trilogy. Love that trilogy. But outside of that, I still have yet to see any of Henry Cavill's Superman movies. Like, I do want to see them. I'm not against them at all. I just have not been that motivated enough to find the time to see them. But I do love Henry Cavill, so I'd watch him. But so I don't have a ton of DC background personally, but I'll tell you, this looked really good to me. Like, I would definitely go see this. If it was out right now, I would go see it with you today. I think the song in the background was perfect to put in that trailer. Really was bringing up the nostalgia. I don't even have that nostalgia, like I said. I think for people who are more experienced, that had to have hit much harder. I loved these aren't really spoilers because it's a trailer. I loved Crypto being in there. I'm interested to see. I'm
That's
sure,
gonna be fun.
I think he is gonna be a bit of a comic relief, but he also looks like he does stuff. So like I think it'll be a good balance. And I do think that yes, I think people will still be going out to see this. It's not gonna be like The Witcher, where Henry Cavill left, and now people are kind of like disowning this next season of The Witcher. And I don't know if that's maybe because there's been multiple iterations of Superman and multiple actors. But obviously, yeah, it sounds like it won't be the same. I think, to his credit in general, such a phenomenal actor. Again, really is very passionate about accuracy and whatnot, and that's why he's leaving The Witcher. And then the fact that he ended up getting, the whole no longer being Superman because of kind of that, is very unfortunate. But I thought it looked really. I think it looked really good. Like you said, visually, I thought it looked beautiful. And I think the scenes with like him having garbage thrown at him by citizens while he himself looks a little disheveled. I don't know. I'm very interested. I don't know what the background is of the story. You're right. I don't think it's going to be an origin story. I think it's going to be all action or all, hey, I'm Superman, I'm here. And there's an antagonist, let's go. Or maybe it will be a Justice League origin story. I don't know. I'm excited for it, but how long do we have to wait again for that one?
Just next year.
Just next year.
Yeah, they're
All right.
kind of doing a starting the hype train early because we've about 7 months, so
all right.
it's gonna go by very quickly.
I would definitely be going to see that. That's our little intro. That's kind of like what's in the news for Marvel, or not just Marvel, but again, we're all about quote unquote nerd content here, and we like to follow all of it.
All of it.
So that will leave us to transition to the main point of this episode. As I stated earlier, we're going to talk about Cap and Iron Man, and just two characters who are, I guess for lack of a better word, no longer really with us, in their own way.
What?
I mean, but have been extremely important to the story so far, and I think will still, in one way or another, continue to impact the storyline going forward. The main, kind of breakdowns we're going to discuss today in comparing and analyzing these two are their origins, the adversity, and their best moments that they've experienced. And then, was their end a fitting end, kind of with a question mark? And then I added on top of the continuing legacy of both of them, because they both have, that's going to be different for both of them. And one is kind of more prominent than the other, but one might suddenly jump ahead with the release of some of these next movies. But so in this breakdown, I am going to be talking about Tony, aka Iron Man. Kobe's going to take Cap. I feel like I should hand you the shield so you can just look at that. And yeah, I was going to let you jump right into this, or I don't know how you want to begin, but origins is what we're going to be talking about first. So
yeah, for starters, we could probably just personally react to how we feel their origins were handled. In both circumstances, we both got a full movie to do this, which is good. I think in the future, with other characters we talk about, it's going to be interesting to sort of highlight how they were introduced. And
as a refresher to myself, I watched the Iron Man trilogy this past week.
Nice.
Wasn't able to hit obviously all of his screen time because he probably has the most screen time out of the original Avengers, but obviously the trilogy is very important. And yeah, I feel like Iron Man, the original, was the most interesting to watch back, especially thinking about it from how we were going to discuss today. I feel like the main thing that I noticed was that, and I will preface this by saying that I haven't read any of the comics. I'm not a comic guy. I'm just a movie guy. So this could be stuff that's covered and mentioned in the comics that I just am not aware of, but this is how I interpreted it from the movie standpoint. And you can feel free to jump in and correct me or help me out if I'm missing anything here. But as far as the Iron Man origin and the whole first movie, I guess I should say by the later movies in the Avengers films, we come to learn that a big part of who Tony is comes from the fact that he and his father didn't really get along, or he perceived his father as not liking him. When I watched back the first Iron Man, none of that really gets brought up. He does mention his father a handful of times throughout the movie, but there's no real evidence that they were on bad terms. At least that I could tell. Even when he's in the desert doing his weapons presentation, he quotes his father, or he says, they say the best weapon is one you never have to fire. I prefer the one you have to fire once because that's how my dad did it, and that's how America does it, and it's worked out pretty well so far. When he's being interviewed before that by the Vanity Fair newswoman, he talks about, she's kind of hinting at what he does and that it's a bad thing in the world, and he goes, look, my father helped defeat the Nazis. He worked on the Manhattan Project. A lot of people, including your college professors, would call that being a hero. I just feel like in the few moments he mentions himself in the original Iron Man, or mentions his father, it's all very positive, which I think is interesting. And then when you get into Iron Man 2 and suddenly start to see himself be destructive and look for the solution to his arc reactor, and he has that conversation with Nick Fury, and Nick Fury goes, what do you remember about your father? That, I feel like, is the first time we hear him say, look, my father didn't like me. He never told me he loved me. We did not have a great relationship. So I just thought that was interesting. And maybe I'm just not reading between the lines enough, or, I don't know. But I just feel like that is a very important part of his character, and I didn't see a lot in the first movie of it.
Yes. So my read on all of that, because I've thought about that a lot over the years. My read on it is he's very defensive of his father. I think he respects and is very proud of his father, but their relationship was complicated because for Howard to accomplish all that he did, it meant he didn't get to spend a lot of time at home and didn't get to spend a lot of time with Tony. I think Howard was probably very aware that his son was smart, was very driven, was a lot like him in that regard. But he didn't get to foster that as much as he could have because, again, he stayed busy with his own work. He stayed busy with S.H.I.E.L.D., all the things that he was doing to continue to keep the world safe because he got recruited very early on and he stayed with it, right? And there's no indications that he backed off at any point or and so when he was around, it was fleeting, and that's probably feeds into Tony's insecurities of I'm not sure he ever really liked me. I'm not sure if he thought I was good enough. But so on one side, you have Tony, who he knows what his father is. He knows that he's gifted and smart and very important and those kinds of things, and probably appreciates that, but slightly resents it because it kept them from spending a lot of time together. I think that manifests most clearly in Endgame when he gets to see him. You can just tell there's a longing there of man, I wish I had more of this. He really soaks it in, even though time's ticking, but you see that. And I think what you mentioned about the kind of the change between 1 and 2. In 1, they're clearly trying to establish that he is directly continuing that legacy. And then towards the end of that movie, you sort of see him question whether he should continue that legacy, directly anyway.
Which, yeah, that's interesting because that's the only other point that I didn't mention is the only other time he really mentions his father significantly in Iron Man 1 is when he's doing that press conference. And that's how he starts the press conference when he says, I never got to say goodbye to my father. If I did,
I would have asked.
Here's the things I would have asked him.
Yes.
Which you would think with the relationship they had, it would be like, oh, I'd tell him off. But again, I think you hit the nail on that. I think with respect, because even though then in Iron Man 2, even after Tony has gotten that message from beyond the grave from his father, and so his opinion of his father has probably changed a little bit when he is developing synthetic vibranium, and he's in that process. And Jarvis goes, "What are you doing, Tony?" And he goes, "Well, I'm discovering," and then he goes, "No, wait. I'm rediscovering a new element." So again, paying homage to the fact that this is not, again, this is my father's work. I'm just doing it in a time where this is physically possible. And even then at the end when he finally does it and he's like, yep, well, he's still taking me to school.
I
He's
do
been
like
dead
that
for 20 years.
detail that he doesn't say discovering. He's
so I think you're right.
rediscovering.
I think respect probably does have. I think respect probably does have a lot to do with it. I just noticed it because I was paying more attention to the origins here. I'm like, that's interesting. Because just a lot more tone of respect here. So I think that's a big thing that I noted in his origins. And then, of course, not trying to take life too seriously. He's the CEO of a company with his own name on it, and he's just living.
And he's enjoying living his best life.
Exactly.
Without responsibility and without the weight of decision-making affecting others, at least at first, because he doesn't realize until later that, a lot of the decisions he has been making are hurting people. Because, again, I think being in the arms industry has benefited them greatly in terms of wealth and power and stuff like that. Means to an end, but now maybe it's time to make a change because this is not serving everybody anymore. And I think he sees the inequality in that, the fact that he is imprisoned by his own weapons essentially.
Yes.
And it's just like, well, man, this isn't just happening to me; it's happening to people all over the world now, so we might need to take a look at this. Yeah.
So, yes, I do think I love, historically, I think I've gone on record as saying this, but I love that movie in general, and I love the origin story in general. So not too many complaints.
But
no.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't think there's a but there. I think the big thing is, we do start to see. We don't see don't want to say we don't see a huge change in that movie, because we do in his personality. But I think bigger changes are on the horizon. And here, the big thing to take away from that story then is, he mentions it already in the caves or early on in the movie that, he's never really let people get very close to him. It's kind of established that Pepper's really the only one that has become that close, maybe Happy as well. So when he loses the people close to him, he does tend to fly off the handle, as anyone normally would. So in this case, I feel like he lets Jensen get close to him in the cave, has the plan to get them both out of there, and then when he doesn't, that obviously doesn't go very well for everyone involved. And then I guess I'd be curious to see if he would have continued to then shut down his weapons manufacturing had they both got out. But I think that obviously was definitely a catalyst, having that conversation as he's dying, and Jensen saying, or him saying, "Thank you for saving me," and then him saying, "Well, don't waste this now." We talked about how you have nothing and no one. Maybe change some things.
I think his eyes are open, but I think it happened faster because of again, the immediate consequences of this versus the long-term consequences. Mm-hmm. He already knows some of the consequences, but he also has to face it happening right in front of him.
Yes. And then
because
go ahead.
Because Jensen knew whether Jensen knew he wasn't getting out alive or planned to not get out there alive, because he wanted to make sure he got out of there alive. Either way, the goal was to get Tony out. Mm-hmm. Jensen was an accessory, and it was either going to be Tony forcing him to get out or something breaking their way so he could get out. But
and then I felt that by the end, again, this change manifests in a larger aspect in the following movies, both the Iron Man and the Avengers movies. But by the end, he feels that he has found that purpose in life, and that is to, again, protect the people in only the way that he can, which is why he, then announces, "This is who I am now." And then, this leads into his interest in eventually joining the Avengers Initiative. Again, we don't really see that interest peaked. We kind of just see Nick Fury show up and say, "Hey, I got something I could talk to you about." But then we do start to see by the end of Iron Man 2 of he's trying to play it cool, "Oh, sure, yeah, you guys got a little boy band here."
But he wants
that's
to
cool.
be involved.
But he wants to be involved, absolutely, and he tries to hide it. So, but that's breaking out of the origins. So that's the Iron Man origins for me, and my kind of thoughts after rewatching it recently.
I think so. When we talk about Steve Rogers, really, I think at least one thing, whereas with Tony, a lot of his character sort of changes slowly throughout the movies, becoming a more of a what's the best way to say it? More of a protector, more of a parental figure, more of a he takes on more responsibility, kind of trying to see the big picture. Steve stays fairly similar throughout with some minor changes, but I think the big character traits you see in the beginning, the deep loyalty and the wanting to help others despite any limitations that he has. One thing I think is fascinating right away that they do with him is when he gets into the program and they're talking about who are we going to try this on first? And obviously he was far from, out of all the candidates he had to be on the bottom. Let's just put that out there. Mm-hmm. Just physically. And, you never want to completely boil it down to physical attributes. But he's in this thing. He's volunteered a million times. They bring him on because they're intrigued. He's clearly he wants to contribute somehow. It's a special program. It's not necessarily a program that takes specific physical attributes, but they make it very clear, notably in the beginning, that everybody else in the program is of pretty able physical capacity, and he's definitely the odd one out. Obviously, and I wish they'd kind of shown this a bit more, but I'm sure they were going to train them in specific intelligence parameters too. Mm-hmm. Things like tactics and that
would have been really interesting.
Those kinds of things,
training,
almost like a spy aspect,
yes.
Espionage kind of thing. Because again, it's a special sector of the military, and that's one of those underrated traits that I think just Captain America in general, but Steve, just that sort of advanced intelligence, creativity, tactics, things like that you don't always see, but then maybe you think after the fact that he planned some of that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so He has to sit down. He has to sit down with the doctor who does tell him that like the big reason you're here, the reason why we're going to do this is because you're a good man, and I think that's the key to all of his development is that throughout it he stays that good man, that good person that just wants to do the right thing, that just wants to help other people at the expense of his own health, at the expense of his own freedom, and I think that's the key. So that when he does change and become somebody with now this power, this ability, he's enhanced, now all these things are out of his reach will always be within reach. And again, not abusing that, not using it for nefarious purposes. To the detriment sometimes that he sort of gets overlooked, especially in that movie right away, obviously they didn't use him right away. You've got this weapon, this asset, and you're like, I like that part of the movie always kind of cracks me up that like the general is just kind of like, I mean, first of all, I wanted like a bunch of you.
Yeah.
I only got one of you. I just have one of you and it's you. I'm good. It's like, you're not even gonna like test it out and like see what he can do. And no, I'm just why don't we just have you do some shows?
We're gonna promote you. You need to promote draft bonds or whatever.
I do. A lot of people just sort of shake their head at that aspect of the movie. I sort of agree in a sense, but I think it's twofold there. It's sort of like makes you shake your head, but it also just kind of shows how even something as great as that can be undervalued, can be sort of just like you shrug your shoulders and just say, like, even if it's just one of something that you really wanted, it can be still enough to do a lot of great things, as we see later on in the movie. And I think the power in that movie of him is rallying the troops, is having a group come together towards a common goal. He rallies a whole bunch of people to cause an uprising, and they get out of trouble. And then he brings together some men to help him on his mission. And this small dedicated crew, they raise hell for, I think it's probably like a couple months, but like that montage of them just kicking ass and taking over, and they're knocking over like they keep on taking them off the board.
Exactly.
That means they're going across the country and doing this over time, and they accomplish a lot.
Right, but then like you said, they didn't even try. It's like, okay, yes, I know you're upset because there's only one of me, but I literally doubled in height, and my arms are so much bigger. Like, you can't tell me, like, yes, obviously you probably can't send him right away to go take out that base that he decided to do by himself, because that would be a big deal. But you can't tell me the general couldn't just be like, look, there's a very small convoy, this far away. We can drop you in with like 3 other soldiers and you can be in charge and just see what happens. To just like test him. It's like, come on. He's just like, nah.
And what's the alternative? Yeah. I just, that's the other thing that always gets me, like, so you're just going to continue what you have been doing?
Yeah.
Even though you're probably getting progressively pessimistic about that?
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact line in the movie, but at some point somebody says something to the effect of like, things aren't going well. Things aren't going as well as we would have hoped. This is supposed to turn the tide, putting all your hopes and dreams on the Super Soldiers program or whatever. But like they needed some wins, and that was going to be one of the big wins for them, which it still turned out to be a big win for them, obviously.
Of course.
But yeah, and again, that stubbornness and sort of like drive from Steve to say, I'm still going to make a difference, to decide to go and to go after Bucky and the rest of the brigade. And I mean, again, he went in there on his own and pulled that off. Obviously he freed some people, and then it's just a domino effect. Like, once you start things, and then the whole factory goes up in flames, what have you. But I think the big thing that movie did, and it's not everybody's favorite origin story in the MCU or favorite first movie, but it laid the base for what you're going to see from him consistently. Trusting people even when maybe they don't trust you the same way. Just the loyalty of like doing everything you can to save Bucky, even though like it was, it was doomed to fail, but doing it anyway. Those kinds of things, like try not to leave anybody behind. You see it in every single movie, and much to to the detriment sometimes. Sometimes it backfires, but that's him through and through. And then just the conviction to say what he thinks when he thinks it, whether it's Nick Fury, whether it's Agent Carter. It doesn't matter who it is. He's going to tell you how he feels. He's going to tell you what he thinks they should do. So I like it as an origin. I really do. I don't know if it's the best origin, but I think it's a very character accurate origin.
I think I would agree. I guess it probably isn't my favorite. I do still really like it, and I think in general it gets a lot more done just besides Captain America. I mean, if you're watching the movies in timeline order, this is our first exposure to any of the any of the Power Stone or Infinity Stones.
Yeah.
First time we see the Tesseract, we see interaction with Howard, our first introduction to Howard, and that background.
Yeah.
I think is great to see then later on as we see Cap and Tony's relationship develop. We see the foundation of S.H.I.E.L.D., which becomes into play. Which, again, in the moment, if you're watching it, it's probably, again, another one of those moments you and I have talked about where it's like, why does any of this other stuff matter? Well, let them cook, people. This is movie one.
Seriously.
This is movie one of 3 dozen. Just let it play out.
We could have that argument over and over again. But
I do think the most important thing as far as that origin, which I guess we technically don't see fully come through into the later movies, but the fact that he doesn't change after the serum, I think that's extremely important to his character and his mantle. And even I remember that because I just saw the clip of that earlier this week where they're discussing him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And Zemo and Bucky and Sam are all discussing the Super Soldier program. And, of course, Zemo wants to shut it down because it's still going on. And Bucky says, hey, maybe you're wrong about super soldiers and the serum and all that because Steve didn't change. He was the same after he took the serum, except for physically, obviously. And Zemo even acknowledges, he's like, you know what, you're right, but there's never been another Steve Rodgers. And it's like, that scene hits so much harder after I'm just, So I was reminded of that again. And so, yeah, I think that's the most important, part of his origin is that he ended up not changing. So, and then the fact that they threw him in a little outfit and put him on stage was just abhorrent. But moving on.
They don't always get it right. Yeah. Right? I mean,
all right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Very good, I feel like, analysis of these two origins. Now we're going to jump into adversity and best moments for our respective or assigned characters. This is tough. I mean, for sometimes there's too many to count here. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first here?
Man. Yeah, I guess I'll touch and I'll try and sort of rapid fire it.
Okay.
Some of them, honestly, some of the moments are tied into Tony Stark too.
True. Yes. So let's do it.
Yeah. The first one that always comes to mind for me, just because I think it's a very symbolic moment, is when they fight in Civil War and Steve is leaving, and Cap yells at him, that, hey, you can't take that shield. That's my father's shield, which I thought was funny to say he would never use it, never would have wanted to use it because he made it for Captain America.
Yes.
But he was a little upset in the moment, understandably, thought his life was in danger. So, tells him, this is my father's shield, doesn't belong to you. So what does Steve do? Because he's Steve Rogers, he drops it. He's like, okay, I don't need the shield. I love this shield, but I don't need the shield. Drops it. So then you fast forward to Endgame when they reunite after a little bit of a hiatus. And he gives him back the shield. But then this time he says, my father made this for you. Which I thought was such an important sort of olive branch moment. Okay, these characters are back in sync. I do love that they clash as much as they do because I mean they're very different people, and I think they do a good job of highlighting that in these movies. But coming back together in that moment, they needed each other, and I think Tony had gone through what he needed to in terms of you know, getting past his demons of everything that happened. And I think Steve was back in the fold. And again, he had gotten through so I thought it was just a very coming back moment for them and using the shield as sort of that symbolic.
I did love that.
So that was really, really cool. Obviously, all the on your left moments that we have. I do pay attention a lot to who's on his left in movies, just because I feel like they're trying to point out certain things a lot of the time. So that's always like been a fun thing that they've done throughout the series. I think one character that really brought out a lot of great moments in him was Black Widow. I really do appreciate their moments together, especially in Winter Soldier, because I think he makes her question a lot of what she does, because she's so used to sort of being this like morally gray spy. But I really think she does push him to think like, you ever think like what you're doing, like maybe you need to deviate too? They have a lot of great conversations, and obviously they become very tight in the movies. But I think their moments are pretty fun together,
definitely,
as well. In terms of diversity, I think you start to see the cracks forming in the Winter Soldier in terms of dealing with authority. You know, he's used to following orders, and he even says to Nick Fury that like, yeah, they didn't always sleep well at night, but they did what they did to keep people safe.
Oh, that was such a hard line.
But for me, that tells me he's already struggling with some of the things they had to do. And I would love there to be a miniseries on all the things that they had to do. Because that was one of those times where you did probably have to deal with some collateral damage and some really terrible side effects of some poor decisions. But like, dealing with some of the things in Winter Soldier of the surveillance and like, killing first, asking questions later, and this the idea of freedom. What does that mean? He was already struggling with that. That really does lead really. It leads really well into the third movie, because they weren't. So he was obviously part of SHIELD. That was his oversight. SHIELD goes down. He doesn't have any oversight. The Avengers and Ultron, still no oversight. They're making decisions about how they want to proceed, with good and bad effects. You get into the third movie, I think he's at a point where like he really does believe that he deserves to have a say and a primary say. And the fact that they want to take that away from all of them just really gets under his skin. And, they fractured because of it and didn't really recover until Endgame, right? Everything that was done after that was a fractured effort. It was a lot of different, like, mini teams trying to, like, assess the situation and deal with it in the moment and not really coordinated. So that adversity of him sort of struggling with that aspect of... because everybody has different motivations too, right? So you're also balancing that. You've got different people, different levels of power, different levels of vulnerability. You got to balance all that when you're trying to keep the world safe, and that's all he really wants to do. And so that adversity all the way through, I thought was very well played. To the point where he went on the run for years. I mean, that's crazy to think about. But he basically disappeared, right? Because he was a fugitive. So that's like the main bit of adversity that we deal with him, and I think they did a really good job with it. And I love that we also have Tony dealing, I'm sure you'll get into it, but dealing with that in his own way, and they had to clash on that.
Oh, absolutely.
Very on brand for them, but just very on brand that they're both trying to accomplish the same thing, but see it very differently.
Absolutely. And I think from Tony's standpoint, since he is a textbook narcissist, most of his adversity or the sources of a lot of his adversity are literally just himself. Whether it's his standalone movies, or the Avengers movies, or or the team ups with like Civil War or Spider-Man movies. I feel like in the standalone Iron Man movies, a lot of it is just he's at first he's figuring out, or he thinks he finds what he's supposed to do with his life and who he really is at the end of Iron Man 1. Then the sequel hits, and immediately it's like, hold on, who you want to be is consuming your life, mentally, and you're too obsessed with these suits, and you think you're just unstoppable. Or what were the 3 words that I used to quote him in Iron Man 2? Cocky, delusional, and destructive is pretty much him in that second movie.
Yeah.
So not only are you becoming a little delusional here, you're literally also dying. Like this person you've decided to become now, it's going to kill you, and it's not like it's going to happen years from now. It's pretty imminent. I mean, by the time I'm sure the latest update we see is before his birthday party when he's at 97% blood toxicity.
Yes.
I'm sure by the time he gets the element finally synthesized, he's at like 99.9.
Oh, probably.
So it's like, this is literally going to happen. You're up against the wire here. So dealing with that, he doesn't want to lose the suits, but he also obviously doesn't want to just die because then it's all for nothing. He can't continue to protect the people that he wants to.
Nope.
And then Iron Man 3 comes along. He's still, he's gotten over the poisoning that's happening, but now he's just, he's more obsessed with the suits because now New York has happened, and he's failing to deal with what happened in New York. The third Iron Man was the most recent one I watched, and I finished up literally just before he got here. Such a good scene in that movie with him and Pepper in the basement where he admits that he is a hot mess, and he talks about, nothing's been the same since New York, and he, especially, I feel like you never notice it until, again, you rewatch this stuff, but he has the line where he talks about, you witness things, aliens, new dimensions, all this stuff, but you still can't understand them. I'm like, yes, I think in general, a lot of people would feel that way, but you're a genius. Like, you should have already in one aspect maybe even thought about alternate dimensions being a thing. But then he sees them, and and aliens too, and then he sees them and he goes, I still can't, this still doesn't quite connect in my mind. So I think that, says a lot. And again, he just literally can't sleep, and he's struggling to the point where he's just in his lab tinkering all day and night. And again, deciding, can I give up these suits? Can I still be someone without these suits? Which by the end we do see that he can be. He admits that they were more of a cocoon. And, they really leave you at the end of 3 hoping that he's turned a new leaf and that, we can see a really new person come out strong in whatever conflicts he's going to partake in here on out. And then I believe the next time we see him is in Civil War. And he breaks it down for Cap, and he goes, yeah, I went through all that. It was great, but I still couldn't give up the suits. So again, he's just going back to the same thing, the same theme all the time. He just can't get over it. He's letting his personal relationships suffer. He loses Pepper for a little bit.
And in general, he is a control freak.
Yes.
That cannot be denied at this point.
And I think, again, he tries to, then he just tries to, in my personal opinion, he doesn't really attack the solution the way it should be. He literally just tries to find ways to delegate that work off on other people with the Accords, with Ultron. Like, I can't do this, but if I built a machine that could do it for me. And then I think that eventually comes to a head, or, the last example of that really is, I feel like, when he's kind of taking Spider-Man then under his personal wing. And I don't know if he ever wants him to be the next Iron Man. I don't think that's what he wants to happen, but he does have that line where he just says, I wanted you to be better than me. Mm-hmm. And so I think he wanted at least to, maybe serve recompense that way.
Because he got out to a rocky start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just in general, if you look at the first 2 movies.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I think there's a lot to be learned for other inspired heroes from that alone. Mm-hmm. I was just looking.
What you got?
When you talk about the adversity he went through, and this adversity that he calls, frankly, in the Marvel Universe, I can't remember. I saw an article, and I should have tried to find it for this, but just talking about how many villains are directly or indirectly related to Tony Stark.
Yes.
So if you go down the line, obviously Iron Man 1, obviously Iron Man 2, obviously the Avengers. Mm-hmm. That's more indirect, but he's part of that effort. Mm-hmm. So that's 3 already. Obviously Iron Man 3. And then you jump to Avengers Age of Ultron. That's direct, right? So that one. Captain America: Civil War. I sort of go back and forth on this, but the way that Zemo identified to tear the Avengers apart was that relationship, and the way he attacked it is by going through Tony. So, I mean, really, that's Tony, and that's not his fault, but it's directly because of him.
I do think, yeah, I do think as a quick side note, if they were having that conversation in Civil War when they're on the couches and Black Widow goes, Tony, you haven't said anything. If alternate universe, he would have said, I agree with Cap. I think movie's over right there. I don't think there's enough of a figurehead.
That's fair.
Enough of a figurehead on the other side to lead an opposition. I think it's just
if they're both on the same side. Yeah,
yes,
I think people probably fall in place at that point.
I think absolutely. I think he's definitely a part of it at least there.
Yeah.
So, all right.
And then just looking ahead further, so the first two Spider-Man villains were directly, I would argue, directly because of him. Mm-hmm. Yes, Spider-Man became the central protagonist and to those villains, but they rose up because of Tony. Mm-hmm. The Vulture because of the whole what did they call that organization? Cleanup.
Yeah, he was whatever. He was part of after the Avengers.
And then they shut him down.
Yes.
And then Quentin Beck was working for him, and he took his work.
Right.
So I mean, there's two more right there.
Yes.
And then you Avengers again. Thanos like directly referenced him by name. Like he knew he was the guy he needed to be the most worried about. On Earth anyway. Mm-hmm. In terms of like accomplishing his entire goal. So I mean, that's quite the list there of just influence across. And again, some of these aren't decisions that he made to hurt anybody else, but the ripple effect of your actions, especially when he wasn't in his element. I would argue the first two movies he was making a lot of it up as he went along. Mm-hmm. I think by the third one, he's sort of like he's securing who he is and what he wants to be, the change he wants to drive, because that. Going from Iron Man 3 to Age of Ultron, what is he trying to accomplish? He's been working on this program, much to the like he wasn't even telling his teammates about this thing he's working on. It's more just like, if I can get this done, then technically we don't have to do this anymore, right? That was
we get to go home.
And on paper, in a vacuum, that sounds like a very cool idea, very good idea, very forward thinking idea. Obviously, when you put in all the details, you're like, Tony, maybe you should have thought this through a bit more, because this is definitely something that if it rebels against you, it would be very hard to control.
Mm-hmm. No, the central theme, you're right, is definitely makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if you'll get into any of this when you talk about Cap, but that's a great question when he poses that to Cap. Like, why do we fight wars? Do we fight wars to keep fighting them, or do we fight them to finish them so we can go home?
That's fair.
And again, I think that's part of the whole...
That's fair.
Thing with Cap, and might be an adversity you talk about, is like, does he need war to actually be a person? That's a whole different conversation. So yeah, you're right. The main idea of it, great, but his execution, he always fails a little bit there.
Ultron brought that idea up, didn't he? That was an Ultron quote. Yeah.
Yes, that was that was when they're splitting the wood. Great scene.
Ultron did a great job of getting into all their heads and making them think about what made them relevant, right? Because you're right. If Cap isn't part of a conflict or a war, can he still be Cap? Can he still be useful? And then, Thor, obviously, like, he stripped him down.
Yes.
In a way that had them all reeling at a very critical time. I think people, again, another movie people should appreciate a bit more. Because if you think about Infinity War and Endgame as a two-parter, I know they're Avengers 3 and 4, but for me, they're like two parts of a big story, right?
Oh, yeah.
So before you get to that story, the Avengers movie between those two movies, you had to really have them question why they wanted to do this in the first place, why they're continuing to do this in the first place. Give them some real adversity, as we're talking about. And... yeah, just jumping back to Cap for a moment.
Yeah, go for it.
I definitely feel he's gonna fight. He's going to resist. He's going to protect no matter what. but there was certainly some fatigue in the way that it was being done. You could almost feel his irritation in Civil War when he's sitting down going through this book. People are asking these questions, like almost of a like, we're just getting to bureaucracy and all these policies, and I want to help people, and then we've got to deal with all of this and all these sort of like eyes looking in and saying, well, you could have done it this way, you should have done this better. It's just, it's a continuation of obviously the second one when he has a conversation with Nick Fury. It comes down to, what are you willing to put up with to achieve your ends? I definitely feel like at the end of Civil War, he decided, well, I think I've put up with more than I want to achieve these ends, and that's when he ultimately decides to go on the run, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I'm forgetting this detail. Who called Steve? It was Bruce Banner, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Oh yeah. He's like, "What are you gonna do? I'm gonna make a call." Yeah, that was after Tony and Spider-Man went away in the. Yeah. Yep.
Oh yeah, they were about to call him.
Yes.
Then the whole thing happened with
the two members of the Black
Order. And then he picks up the phone and calls.
Yes.
Because obviously
he finds the phone. Yeah.
Things were much worse off at that point.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and so again, they didn't get to, obviously we talk about that movie. I think the great thing about Infinity War is, again, they weren't all together.
Yeah.
They were fractured. They were all trying to achieve the same goal without a lot of communication. It all kind of came to a head at the end of the movie, and then it was over, and they just kind of had to deal. So then you get those moments where they come together. But I think it's important to note that he had crossed the bridge and was willing to bridge the divide. Like, he was going to call him. He's going to say, hey, I need your help. Because obviously he hadn't called him before that point, right?
Yeah.
But he had the phone with him.
Yeah.
He had the phone with him. He could have just stashed it somewhere, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just like, whatever, I can do this on myself. He had it with him. He was ready. He was ready to make that move when he needed to.
Exactly. Yep.
So
I do love that detail. They just had it on him. He was just on a jog with Pepper before all that went down.
Right.
Random jog, and but he had the cell phone with him just in case. He's like, if anything goes down and I need to call Cap, I'm here. It's ready. Like, that is a great detail.
Yeah.
I think for me, I felt that his best moments, Iron Man, Tony Stark, fell into one of two categories. Either it was the moments where he was getting vulnerable, just because, again, he never does that. So for me, I really loved watching those moments. So the big ones would be, for me, where I just mentioned Iron Man 3 when he's talking to Pepper about how he's a hot mess. Just watching him watch his dad's message to him from beyond the grave, that was a great scene.
Oh man,
just seeing you can just see the switch in his brain flip. It was beautifully done. Great acting by RDJ. I think I've mentioned this at least a couple times, but it is one of my favorite, I think, moments in the whole series, Marvel series. That's Ultron, Age of Ultron, when Nick Fury finally shows up and he's just in that barn with Tony. And Tony literally he's been playing the tough guy this entire time, and he just breaks down to Nick Fury, and he's like, this is literally all my fault. Going back to your point about how many villains are related to him, he's like, this is all my fault. I started this on this journey. I'm going to get us all killed. I put us on this path, and I wasn't strong enough to end it and protect us all. Great scene. Really, really sums up in one scene his trauma and his mental well-being or lack thereof. The other categories were usually our fight scenes, or I guess actions he takes related to those feelings. So the first one that comes to mind is, I love the scene in the original Avengers when he suits up against Loki and he talks about, and he
threatening him.
Yeah, well, that too, but also when he finally suits up and he mentions Phil Coulson. He's like, dude, everything you got coming at you right now, you did have us broken up, like you described, like you were just saying. You were right. You were gonna break us apart,
and then he did that,
and now you really fucked up in a way you probably never expected would happen. and we're coming for you. And we're bringing everything. We're bringing the Hulk. We'll get him here. Don't worry. He's coming. And it's not going to end well for you. So that was a great scene. I love the scene in Iron Man 1, the rescue in Galmira. And again, that's just him. That's immediately following him finding out his company's been sending black market weapons to Galmira. And again, that's him remembering, that's where Jensen said he is from, and even though he's even though he's gone now and his family is gone as well, that's a big deal for me. That hits home, or that hits emotionally for me, and I'm not just going to stand by and let the rest of his friends do that, especially with weapons that have my name on them. So honestly, just scenes like that, and even like it is. I don't like to watch it, but the fight with him and Cap is also very motivated like that. You see him then finally starting to digest the feelings for his mom, which I feel like never really come up until that moment, which is also an interesting, way to tell that story.
Yeah.
But now he's like, dude, you killed my mom, and this isn't gonna fly. Mm-hmm. So it's just they're all very emotionally motivated, but I think that's because, again, Tony doesn't really show his emotions. So again, the character's portrayed very well in that. Yeah, he's very cool and collected and playboy for 98% of the time, and then that 5% when he's not, he's going hard, and he is a wreck emotionally, and it's great. It's portrayed beautifully, directed very well. So those are the best moments for me. I am probably missing some, but those are the ones that immediately stand out after rewatching the trilogy.
The funeral for me in Endgame, I saw that movie in theater 5 times.
That's right,
including twice on the first go around was twice.
Yes, you saw it literally back to back.
Yeah, which was
walked out of one, walked right.
Was the move, but also not the move.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty heart wrenching.
Yeah.
Just going through it a second time right away and knowing what moments were coming, but like the funeral was executed so well. Getting to see him talk to his family and then going straight into seeing all the heroes there. You just don't expect to see that, and then they're panning around and like everybody's there, and you're realizing how many people he's touched, and again, some bad decisions for sure, but like so many great decisions to bring so many people together.
Yes.
Over time, it's always a great moment for me. We're talking about like legacy for him. Like, where do you even start? You've got Rhodey and you've got Pepper that are continuing his legacy in 2 unique ways. You've got a direct mentee in Spider-Man who he wanted to lift him up and bring him to a whole different stratosphere. One thing I like about the trilogy for Spider-Man is that like he does have all this like tech that is like added to what he does.
Yeah.
But we're definitely going to see a slightly stripped down version of him going forward.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think that's like, I think in a way that's cool, but it's also like he's had the opportunity to be blessed by Stark, but that's also going to make him very like going forward. It's like, all right, well now I don't have all this stuff, but like, how do I improvise? How do I adapt?
Right.
How do I make use of things when I can? Because he had to learn that lesson directly from Tony, because he had the bells and whistles. Tony takes it all away. So when he makes his big move in his first movie, he's doing it stripped down to his usual unteched up,
Right.
So just another person, I know it's not like a mentor or relationship or anything like that, but I think the relationship between Doctor Strange and Tony Stark was very much a mirror. But in terms of going forward for Doctor Strange, just his influencing him and remembering the weight of the decisions you have to make, knowing what he saw and having to orchestrate events to get there, and then that must have been one of the toughest things to do in that moment, to make sure it got over the finish line, because telling somebody without words that, hey, it's time for you to die, and then having them go ahead and do that, like I can't imagine the toll that takes on the person no matter, what position they're in. I think we can all agree that they definitely they did a lot of great things.
Oh yeah.
With Tony.
Definitely.
When it comes to Steve, I like to think about. I mean, obviously Falcon and Bucky are the first two that come to mind. It's always fascinating to think that throughout all these movies, Steve's thinking about when I'm gonna be done, what happens after that. And I'm sure part of him was probably thinking, at least at first, Bucky will always be around after I'm gone, mm-hmm. right? Or at least he'll be around. Should be around. Mm-hmm. But then I almost feel like the thinking probably shifted, I think, in Infinity War. Because after being on the run with somebody like that, and I mean, Steve doesn't have any personal attachments, right?
No.
No family attachments. I'm sure he has personal attachments, but
sure.
Sam did. Sam still has family. Mm-hmm. And probably had some friends, yeah. and he went off the grid to be with him and help him out for years. And I think that probably left a mark on him, and he probably felt at that point if he's willing to do all this, I think he'd be willing to make some of the ultimate sacrifices down the road.
Yes.
A lot of people said that they were surprised at the end of that movie when they have their moment with the shield. That was probably one of the least surprising moments for me, just because you could sort of feel it coming. Yeah, I just felt right. It's obviously something it's a comic book accurate thing. They've both had the shield, Bucky and Sam, but it just felt like that's the way things were going, and that made a lot of sense to me. I loved the way the scene was done, mm-hmm. how it wasn't he was genuinely surprised and touched by it, because I'm sure in his mind he was just thinking we're gonna go back to business as usual after this, you know. So for Bucky, I think again trying to honor his friend through everything he does going forward. They had a very special relationship, and when Cap made his decision to go and live a life, leaving him behind, I think part of the reason you do that is because you have somebody like that around.
Oh yeah.
Behind that you're leaving behind, who's going to continue to do the things that you would have done too. One thing I do want to just talk about them in tandem. Going into Endgame, I feel like I've brought this up before, we've been talking, but when going into that movie, I definitely thought that Cap was going to be the one to die, and that Tony was going to have his happily ever after. So I do love that it's kind of subverted expectations and flipped those two things. Although Tony did get a pseudo happily ever after. He got to live a life with a wife and kid. Mm-hmm. For a while.
During the blip.
The blip. So it's not like it was, it wasn't like a joyless time. Obviously, the world was a very different place, but he still got to experience that. Because, there's Pepper could have been taken away from him, and he could have been lonely and miserable during that time. So I think it's sort of cool that he got to have that, and then still sacrificed himself, because he could have said, I gotta hold on to this, but as we know, he recorded a message, so he was prepared for that possibility too. He's always prepared, right?
Yeah.
So and the one thing, touching on legacy, which I'm really hoping we get to see, I'm sure it's going to happen that way, but I don't know for sure because it hasn't happened yet. But I am interested to see Ironheart when it comes out.
Yes.
And I hope the rumors are true that he successfully created an AI of himself before he died. Uh-huh. And I don't know, again, it's all part of the story that they're cultivating. However it ends up in her hands, I'm sure she's clearly aware of who he is and that and all that. So I hope that all happens and we get to experience him in that way, because I think that'd be super cool.
Absolutely. I think that moves us into Well, the end of our character arcs, we want to talk about if we think that they got a fitting end, and then I don't know if, and then any notes we have on their legacy being continued. I'll start. I think short and sweet. I think it absolutely was a fitting ending. Tony did start all of this, and all he ever wanted to do since he started was protect the people that he loves, and that's definitely what he did. And he showed, even from the first Iron Man movie, he showed in every single Avengers movie that he was willing to sacrifice his life. But even in the first Iron Man movie, at the very end, when he tells Pepper to blow up the arc reactor, she's like, "You're gonna die if I do it." And he's like, "Just do it."
Every movie, or at least
literally does it.
It's for sure every Avengers movie.
Yes.
And almost every movie that he's in, a move. It could be argued that there's a move in there that could have ended his life.
Yes. So I think, definitely, fitting, and especially because am I a guy who likes the sappy, happy endings of movies? Yes. So would I have loved to see that for Tony, especially after seeing his life during the blip? Yes. But I think going back to, if you thought Cap was going to be the one to end up dying and Tony was going to get his happy ever after, I think it really is truer to character that how it ended up that way, especially because, the conversation that Pepper and he have during the blip, when he discovers time travel, and he's like, "By the way, just so you know, I did this." And he looks at her and he goes, "I could just put this in a box, drop it in the bottom of the lake, and go to sleep, and no one would ever know that I've invented time travel and that I could fix this." And I think she begrudgingly says, "But would you really be able to do that?" Because even though he's been fighting to leave that life behind for all this time, she knows that he never, I don't think, truly can. I think she's enjoyed that time as much as he has. But I think even she's like, these days are probably numbered. We're not surprised that it didn't work out that way. Yes, it would have been nice to see. But I think that's a much more fitting end. And I think even Pepper is like, yeah, that's who he is, and I could never stop it. And I think legacy. There's a lot of opportunities, with Spider-Man or with Peter Parker. I think specifically, again, I don't think Tony ever wanted him to become the next Iron Man, but he wanted him to be better than him, and I think he did teach him a lot of good lessons. You mentioned, just kind of learning to adapt in all situations, whether or not he has his tech. That's definitely a big one. I think the other big one is the willingness to be able to sacrifice yourself for, again, the people that you love, because without dying, that is literally what Peter did in his last movie. At the end of the movie, no one knows who he is anymore. He loses everyone close to him, and goes from his very nice life as a normal student with an aunt and girlfriend and going to a great college to, okay, now I'm in New York in this shitty apartment. I don't have my tech anymore, or at least that's kind of how we're left to believe it. And I'm still going to continue to be Spider-Man in my more just normal, more comic book accurate suit that I think we're used to seeing. So I think the legacy is definitely being passed on. I am definitely, you're right, going to be curious to see what happens with Morgan. And then Ironheart. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like some people didn't like how Ironheart was introduced. But I think, again, they're not done with that story yet, so let them cook. And then, obviously, with the latest updates, RDJ confirmed coming back, there's room for either a further, continuation or potentially ruining everything. And I hope that's not the case. I'm sure it's not. Fitting ending. We were obviously all sad to see him go, but I think, it's perfectly summarized or capped off when he's dying at the very end of the movie, and Peter says, "Hey, we won," and then Pepper says, "You can rest now," because that's, again, all he's, literally those two things, that's all he's ever, I think, wanted. So beautifully done. Definitely hurt to watch, and still hurts every time I watch it. But being in that theater, seeing that, I don't know how you did that twice in a row and then went on 3 more times in the theater.
At great personal costs.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts on Iron Man's arc and Tony's arc.
Very well, very, very well put. I think it's very quick for Steve, really. I think really it's about, his famous line, "I can do this all day." It's like till your last breath, till you can't, you can, never giving up. And really imbuing that into whoever he's with, the will to do it for the people that you're protecting and that you represent. And despite all the personal challenges and things that you're going through, despite maybe the limitations that you have, maybe you don't have what you should have, what you need, what you'd like to have, like you got to do it anyway. Yeah, and I think it's fitting that he was able to always be able to go into battle with somebody at his side almost every time, and that they were going to have his back no matter what. I do love in Endgame that it was the three of them ultimately that went after Thanos first.
Oh yeah.
Thor, Iron Man. Like
Absolutely.
I thought that was perfectly done, and that conversation just kind of speaks to all of their attitudes too, but like in a way of such a show of agreement that it's sort of stunning. Thor just aggressive, like let's make sure we kill him properly this time. Steve with the it's a trap, right? And then Iron Man with the classic I don't care. But like you don't sense any sort of disagreement. It's just them all raising the points that the character would oft raise, but also just all in agreement in that moment of like, let's go and take care of this business. I love that. I love Thor just standing there watching. I like to think in my head that he's literally stood there watching for like a good 10 minutes. Yeah. And Thanos is just sitting there probably maybe even longer than that. And like they probably have seen each other by now. And, Thanos obviously doesn't care. Yeah. And Thor's like, I'm just going to wait. It's fine. Whatever. Oh, cool. You're here.
Yep.
Okay. You're here. All right. We're ready to go do this. It's a great scene.
And Thor would have gone down by himself. No
and
question.
Right.
But I definitely think he was waiting.
Oh yeah. To have them and have the backup and have that moment of like, we're finally going to get to do this. Cause and we all know how much he regretted not doing it properly in Infinity War. So again, it's a great referendum on where they're all at. Also speaking to their character, it's great.
Yeah, I do think he had a fitting end. I think it's a little. I think people are a little annoyed or like bothered by the fact that like we don't know where he's at though at this point, which I get. But also there's other stories that are going on. So let's give those. Those are the ones that are more important. Like wherever, it doesn't matter where he is. If he is on the moon, like they joke about, he's not up there fighting crime. He's when we see him, he is visibly old. He's not putting on a suit anymore. So at the very best, he's up there consulting on battle plans, but he's not putting on the suit anymore. And that's what you really want to see. Like, I think you would be more disappointed if you actually saw him and he was either, up there just doing that, or if he was just at home with Peggy reading the paper. Those are the two outcomes, I think. So, but I think a very fitting end, and he's got a clear continuation of his legacy in Sam, and even Bucky, and we'll see how that continues to play out. But I think so far it's going pretty well.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think obviously we're gonna get to see a lot of those lessons manifest in A Brave New World next year for Sam. I already saw some of the lessons manifest in the TV series. And then with Bucky, like it's always just struggling to continue to do good despite all the sort of connotations of bad that he's been associated with. And that corner's been turned obviously, but now you sort of have to steer some other sort of like dubious individuals in that direction too. I think he and Yelena are both gonna play a big role in doing that for this team, which I think that the team is brought together probably not in a way that we would like.
Oh, no.
But it seems pretty clear they're going to have to stop something from happening and make that choice, and hopefully that's what happens. But, like, it's going to be very cool to see some of those character decisions and reasoning. And, see what Bucky's been up to, obviously. I think it's interesting he's not appearing in A Brave New World, so I wonder if there's still a cameo opportunity or a post-credit or something. Because clearly it sounds like they've made him more of a headliner in the Thunderbolts, which is fine. Just think it's notable because he's always been part of that franchise. So.
Yes, you're right. I feel like there's either got to be a cameo or the end credit scene will probably be like, we'll just pan to him suddenly.
Or a
it'll
link
be like,
between those two movies somehow, which
yeah.
they're sort of trying to make it sound like there's some links there. So we'll see what those are all about.
Perfect. Oh, man. Well, any last notes on either Cap's arc or Tony's arc at all before we move to our kind of wrap up?
Only that I think they're sort of the arcs and legacy are secure, and I know there's some angst about if they ever return and how that would impact things. And I think it'll just be like an addendum.
Yeah.
And I really do want to point to what happened with Wolverine in Deadpool and Wolverine as like not completely ripping up what came up before, but adding to, because I guess I don't want to completely spoil it just in case you haven't watched it, but they definitely they touch on some things that have happened in an interesting way.
Right.
And some people would be upset about that, but I think they do it in a way ultimately that you're like, all right, they still honored him and those kinds of things. So I just think it's about how you do it and having respect for it. And I think that example alone shows that Marvel would have some reverence. They know how important Tony Stark is, and they know how important Steve Rogers is.
Yes.
So if we see him again, it's going to be for good reason.
Absolutely. And again, that's kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about in our last episode too, I believe, where it's like, yeah, we're going to see Tony again, maybe not as Tony Stark, or however that's going to work out. But again, if you're upset about that or a little uneasy, again, let it happen, let them cook. RDJ would not come back to ruin the legacy of Iron Man, especially considering what that has done for him as a person, and I mean the ultimate personal comeback story in general. So let it cook. I am a little worried about it too, but I'm optimistically worried. So great. That is it for our main content. So what we like to do, we didn't do this after the last episode because again, we just like to talk about what might be coming next or what's going on in our lives. But with how the last episode played out, that was
we figured it would wait.
We literally. The difference between filming episode 2 and 3 was about 15 seconds. So, Kobe, what is new and what do you want to plug for our wrap up here? You've been working hard.
Yeah, I just finished a year of school, radiology program, year in, feeling pretty good. Be starting that up again in January, so I'm enjoying my break right now by doing some podcasting.
Nice.
Things coming up on the horizon. I've got a lot of TV and movie stuff to catch up on, which I probably won't. I'm going to try. Frisbee's done for the year, but I'm going to be keeping dodgeball rolling through the spring, so that's going to be good.
Didn't you win your last league, or you were in the playoffs and did pretty well?
So the first one I was ever in, I got runner-up.
Nice.
And then the second time, we did get the championship.
Nice. Okay.
The most recent one I was in ended sadly.
damn.
However, not as great, but it was an up and down year, so lots of learning.
Nice.
But this new one that I'm doing is an extremely competitive one, so I'm just interested to see how I hold up.
Definitely.
There's some crazy good players in this league, so we'll see if I can hold up.
Love it.
Other than that, honestly, just going to be enjoying the rest of the football season. It's been a great season for the Vikings, a great season for the division, entertaining just in general, lots of fascinating things going on there. So going to be bittersweet when it ends, but I'm enjoying it right now.
Definitely.
And, we just finally starting to feel winter here, so...
Yeah, we finally got our first big snowfall. It was like 5 to 7 inches was projected. I don't know what it actually got. But I'm kind of excited about that because it's not super freezing cold, and I do like a good white Christmas. What's coming next, or what's new with me? I'm still as busy as ever, but in 2025, I really want to. I'll probably still be busy. That's, I don't think, going to change, but I'm really trying to shift my busyness into, only using my time for things that I really care about. So, I kind of have a list of if it's not giving me this, or this, I don't want to do it anymore because I just, at this point, I'm working 60 hours a week, which again that might change, and that's my own doing between my full-time job and working at my distillery, working 3 days at the distillery, and then I have volleyball, which we're on a break from right now, but we'll be back doing that in the new year. And then Wednesdays I like to go swing dancing, but I haven't gone in a few weeks because it's just sometimes that's my only free night of the week, and I just need a free night every now and then. So, but I'm going to try to be a little less busy, or again, just hone in on the most important things to me. We're going to keep doing these podcasts. When we come back, it'll be, let's see, I think, I just finished filming this is the third episode of both the podcasts I've done. So my goal, I know, right? So my goal is now for 4 to keep these going both regularly. And now that we'll have 3 in our bank, I'm hoping to get these out on a full podcast media, or whatever that's called, instead of just putting these on YouTube. So they're going to be out there wherever podcasts can be found, hopefully, starting with episode 4, and I'll put these as historical episodes. We're going to make some changes to the studio, nothing too crazy, but we're going to finish these panels. I'm going to put some lights in. I'm going to change this table because at the moment it's just Kobe and I. Hopefully we will have guests in the future, but I've been noticing with my other podcasts where I sometimes have 3 or 4 people around this table, it gets tight. This room is kind of small, so we can make it work, but we're going to change things up. Also, if you're doing any events in 2025 that you need a bartender for, let me know. I have I officially have an LLC now to do that stuff under, because I want to do more of it, and I need to start doing it legitimately. As far as what's coming next for content, Kobe's been giving a lot of the recent episode ideas, which I love. So I don't know if you have any more immediately in the bank. Otherwise, I'm going to try to come up with maybe our next episode.
Okay.
But if you have one you're really passionate about that you think would be good, send it to me, or feel free to tease it, because it'll probably happen at some point, whether it's our next episode or not. But obviously, as the universe continues to evolve, we'll still have plenty to discuss.
Oh, for sure. I think I'm going to keep a couple of my ideas close to the vest.
I like it.
For some secrecy and some yeah. I'm gonna keep it. Well, we're gonna discuss, because I got some great ideas, but I'm sure you do as well.
Oh yeah. So perfect. All right. Well, as always, it was a pleasure to have you here. And again, he and I could talk about this
we could do this for
easily
a whole day.
I had to stop us halfway through filming this to change the batteries and my mics, which hopefully I'll change that too, so we don't have to do that. But if we let ourselves go, I would have to change that thing 2 or 3 times before we are eventually like, we should probably talk about other stuff or go eat, because sometimes we forget to do that. But, because we're both very busy.
Yeah, everybody have a safe, happy, healthy, and just have a great holiday.
Yes,
no matter where or what you're doing.
Yes, if this comes out before, great. If not, we hope you had a safe one. Just be careful out there, and Happy New Year. We're looking forward. We will see you in 2025.
We will see you next year.
Oh my gosh. It's my first one of the year. All right. And with that, we are out. See ya.